After that night, I got pregnant with triplets from a CEO with no heirs and discovered true love. The heady aroma of caramelized sugar and vanilla perfumed the air of Zahara Olivia Monroe's kitchen as she carefully pulled a tray of perfectly golden macarons from the oven. Her expert eye scanned the delicate shells, a smile tugging at her full lips as she noted their pristine feet and smooth, unblemished tops. At 32, she had mastered the art of French pastry with the same determination that had earned her the nickname Z, short, sweet, and unforgettable. Just like Grandma taught me, she whispered to herself, her box braids swaying as she placed the tray on the cooling rack. The morning light filtered through the industrial windows of her test kitchen in Atlanta, catching the golden undertones of her warm brown skin. At 5'9", Zahara commanded presence in any room she entered, but here, in her sanctuary of sugar and spice, she was truly in her element. The kitchen timer chimed again, pulling her attention to another creation in progress. As she moved with practiced grace between the stainless steel workstations, her Jo Malone wood sage and sea salt perfume mingled with the sweet aromas surrounding her. Each step was purposeful, each movement precise, a dance she had perfected over years of dedication to her craft. "Ms. Monroe," her assistant's voice cut through her concentration, "the New York event coordinator is on line 1. They want to confirm the menu for next week's tech industry gala." Zahara's fingers unconsciously began their familiar rhythm against the marble countertop, a habit that surfaced whenever she needed to focus. The New York Gala was more than just another high-profile event. It was her chance to showcase how she had transformed her grandmother's Afro-Brazilian recipes into modern masterpieces that commanded top dollar in America's most exclusive circles. "Tell them I'll call back in 10 minutes," she replied, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had fought hard for their place in the culinary world. As she turned back to her work, her reflection caught in the polished surface of a copper pot, a successful black woman who had built her empire from scratch, one perfectly executed dessert at a time. Later that evening, as she packed her signature collection of tools into their custom KC, her best friend Aisha Imani Cole burst into the kitchen like a whirlwind of energy and opinions. "Girl, please tell me you're not planning to work straight through until you leave for New York," Ash said, her chocolate-colored curls bouncing as she perched herself on a nearby stool. "You know what they say about all work and no play." Zahara closed the case with a decisive click. "Play is a luxury I can't afford right now, Ash. This gala could open doors I've been knocking on for years. And that's exactly why you need to be fresh and fabulous, not burned out from pulling 16-hour days." Ash's dark eyes sparkled with mischief. "Besides, when was the last time you went on a date?" The question hung in the air like smoke, making Zahara's shoulders tense. Dating had become a foreign concept, filed away with other luxuries she'd deemed unnecessary for success. The memory of her last relationship, and the devastating choice she'd made, still lingered like a bitter aftertaste she couldn't quite shake. "I date my desserts," Zahara quipped, but the joke fell flat, even to her own ears. "They're sweeter and less complicated." Ash's expression softened. "Z, you can't keep punishing yourself forever." "Oh, what happened back then?" "We're not having this conversation." Zahara cut her off, busying herself with wiping down an already spotless counter. "I have an empire to build, remember?" "An empire can get lonely," Ash murmured, but she knew better than to push further. Instead, she changed tactics. "At least tell me you're wearing that gold dress I helped you pick out for the gala, the one that makes you look like a queen." Despite herself, Zahara smiled. The dress was stunning, a modern take on old Hollywood glamour that complemented her curves and made her feel invincible. "Yes, Your Highness, I'm wearing the dress." "Good, because I have a feeling about this event." Ash hopped off the stool and grabbed her purse. "Something tells me it's going to change your life." Zahara rolled her eyes, but there was affection in the gesture. "Your Sagittarius is showing again. Mock all you want, but my intuition is never wrong." Ash paused at the door. "Just promise me you'll be open to whatever the universe has planned." "The only thing the universe has planned is me delivering the best dessert service that Gala has ever seen," Zahara called after her friend's retreating form. Alone again, Zahara allowed herself a moment of stillness. Her gaze drifted to the small Adinkra symbol tattooed on her wrist, a reminder of strength and resilience passed down through generations of strong women in her family. Her grandmother had always said that life's sweetest moments come when you least expect them, like the perfect rise of a souffle or the precise moment when sugar caramelizes. As she gathered her things to leave, the setting sun cast long shadows across her kitchen, painting everything in shades of gold and promise. In just a few days, she would be in New York, proving once again that she deserved her place among the culinary elite. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that fate had already set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about success, love, and the careful walls she'd built around her heart. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation and precision. Every recipe was tested and retested, every detail scrutinized until it met her exacting standards. By the time she boarded her flight to New York, her collection of signature desserts was packed safely in specialty containers, each one a testament to her heritage and innovation. The city that never sleeps welcomed her with its familiar energy, a pulse that matched her own driven rhythm. As her taxi wove through the evening traffic toward her hotel, Zahara allowed herself to imagine the possibilities that awaited her at tomorrow night's gala. New contracts and expanding her brand, maybe even that coveted spot on the Food Network she'd been considering. What she didn't imagine, couldn't have predicted, was that in less than 24 hours, she would come face to face with Soren Alexander Caldwell, a man whose presence would shake the foundations of her carefully constructed world. A man whose steel blue eyes would see past her defenses and whose touch would ignite something she thought she'd buried long ago. But that was tomorrow's story. Tonight, she was still just Zahara Monroe, the girl from Atlanta who had turned sugar and dreams into an empire. As she stepped into her hotel room, she caught her reflection in the full-length mirror, all 5'9" of confidence and curves, box braids arranged perfectly, skin glowing with purpose. "You've got this," she told her reflection, fingers automatically finding their rhythm against the nearest surface. Tomorrow is just another day in the kitchen. She couldn't have been more wrong. The night settled over Manhattan like a velvet cloak, stars hidden behind the city's perpetual glow. In her room, Zahara began her evening ritual, checking her tools one last time, reviewing her timeline for tomorrow's setup, and finally, allowing herself a moment to call her grandmother. "Vo?" she said, when the familiar voice answered. "Klaus, I made it to New York. Mina querida." Her grandmother's warm voice wrapped around her like a hug. "Remember what I always say about destiny?" Zahara smiled, touching her Adinkra tattoo. "That it's like baking. Sometimes you have to trust the process even when you can't see the final result." "Exactly. Now get some rest. Tomorrow needs you at your best." As she ended the call, Zahara couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something momentous. If only she knew how right that feeling would prove to be. The Metropolitan Ballroom pulsed with the quiet energy of power and privilege. Crystal chandeliers cast their gentle glow over New York's elite as they mingled beneath towering floral arrangements that seemed to touch the ceiling. In the adjacent kitchen, Zahara adjusted her gold dress with steady hands. Though her heart raced with pre-event jitters she hadn't felt since her first major commission. "Everything is perfect, chef," her sous chef whispered, gesturing to the elaborate dessert displays they'd spent hours arranging. Each piece was a masterpiece, delicate macarons in sophisticated flavor combinations, hand-painted chocolate bonbons that gleamed like jewels, and her signature passion fruit soufflés that would be baked fresh throughout the evening. Zahara nodded, but her fingers found their familiar rhythm against her palm. The stakes tonight were higher than anyone knew. 3 major hotel chains had representatives in attendance, each one a potential contract that could expand her brand beyond Atlanta. She couldn't afford a single misstep. "Time check!" she called out to her team, her voice carrying the authority that had become her trademark. 40 minutes until first service, chef." She took a deep breath, inhaling the mingled aromas of chocolate, vanilla, and caramel. The kitchen was her domain, her safe space. Out there, among the sharks in designer clothes, she would need to be more than just a chef. She would need to be a businesswoman, a brand, a force to be reckoned with. The event coordinator appeared at her elbow, tablet in hand. "Ms. Monroe, they're requesting you join the other featured vendors for pre-event photos." Zahara smoothed her hands over her dress one final time. The gold fabric caught the light, making her skin glow like honey. Her box braids had been styled into an elegant updo, with a few strands left loose to frame her face. The overall effect was exactly what she'd aimed for, sophisticated, confident, and unmistakably herself. "Lead the way," she said, squaring her shoulders. The main ballroom had filled considerably in the time she'd been doing final preparations. The who's who of New York's tech industry, moved through the space like well-dressed planets in a sophisticated solar system, each with their own orbit of admirers and associates. As she posed for photos with the other vendors, all men, she noted without surprise, Zahara felt the familiar weight of being the only black woman in her position. She'd learned to wear that weight like armor, to let it fuel rather than hinder her. "And here's our star of the evening," the photographer said, positioning her in the center of the group. "The dessert course is all anyone's been talking about." Before she could respond, a murmur rippled through the crowd. The energy in the room shifted, like a compass suddenly finding north. Zahara turned, curious despite herself, and felt the world tilt on its axis. Soren Alexander Caldwell had entered the room. He moved through the crowd with the quiet confidence of someone who knew their own power. At 6'1", he commanded attention without effort, his bespoke charcoal suit fitting him like it had been poured onto his athletic frame. But it was his eyes that caught and held Zahara's attention, steel blue and penetrating. They seemed to cut through the pretense and pageantry of the evening. "Mr. Caldwell!" The event coordinator materialized at his side. We were just photographing our featured vendors." Those steel blue eyes swept the group, landing on Zahara with an intensity that made her glad she'd locked her knees. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, interest, before he schooled his features back to polite attention. "Please, don't let me interrupt," he said, his voice a rich baritone that seemed to resonate in Zahara's chest. But the moment had already broken. The photographers dispersed, the other vendors drifted away, and Zahara found herself alone under that penetrating gaze. "You're not the usual pastry chef," he said, taking a step closer. His cologne, Creed Aventus, she would later learn, wrapped around her like an invisible embrace. "And you're not the usual tech CEO," she countered, tilting her chin up slightly. "I don't recall reading about your coding skills in Forbes." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, transforming his severe features into something almost approachable. "You read Forbes? I read anything that gives me an edge." She met his gaze steadily. "Knowledge is power, Mr. Caldwell." "Soren," he corrected, and she noticed his hand move to his tie, a nervous tell she would come to recognize. "And you are?" "Zahara Monroe." She offered her hand, determined to keep this professional despite the electricity crackling in the air between them. "But most people call me Z." His hand engulfed hers, warm and slightly calloused. Unexpected for a CEO. "Zahara," he said, ignoring her offered nickname, Hebrew for a brilliant light. The fact that he knew the meaning of her name caught her off guard. Before she could respond, a server appeared with a tray of champagne. Soren took 2 glasses, offering one to her with a grace that spoke of old money and careful breeding. "I don't drink before service," she said, but something made her add, "Ask me again after dessert." His eyes crinkled at the corners, not quite a smile, but close. "Is that a promise, Miss Monroe?" The way he said her name sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the ballroom's aggressive air conditioning. Warning bells rang in her head. This man was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his wealth or position. "It's a possibility," she replied, taking a step back. "If your palate proves as sophisticated as your taste in suits." This time he did smile, a brief flash of white teeth that transformed his entire face. "I look forward to being judged." The event coordinator appeared again, apologizing profusely as she pulled Soren away to meet some important investors. Zahara watched him go, her heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with pre-service jitters. Back in the kitchen, she threw herself into final preparations, but her thoughts kept drifting to steel blue eyes and the ghost of warmth where his hand had held hers. She shook her head, forcing herself to focus. She was here to work, to build her empire, not to get distracted by a man who probably dated supermodels and collected companies like some people collected art. The evening progressed like a well-orchestrated symphony. Her desserts were met with exclamations of delight and demands for her business card. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, networking and building connections, but always aware of him at the edges of her consciousness. Their eyes would meet across the room, brief moments of connection that felt more intimate than they had any right to. It wasn't until the evening was winding down that he found her again. She was in a quiet corner, finally allowing herself a glass of champagne, when his presence enveloped her from behind. "Your passion fruit soufflé," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear, was a religious experience. She turned to face him, careful to maintain proper distance despite the magnetic pull between them. High praise from someone who probably has personal chefs in 3 countries. 4, he corrected, and that ghost of a smile played across his lips again. But none of them have your... He paused, searching for the right word. Soul. The way he said it, like he could see right through her carefully constructed professional facade to the artist underneath, made her breath catch. Soul food with a French twist, she said, falling back on her usual elevator pitch. My grandmother's recipes reimagined. Tell me about her, he said, and the genuine interest in his voice surprised her. Before she could stop herself, she was telling him about summer days in her grandmother's kitchen, learning to make brigadeiros and beignets, the way her grandmother taught her that love was an essential ingredient in any recipe. He listened with an intensity that made her feel like they were alone in the crowded ballroom, his eyes never leaving her face. She sounds remarkable, he said when she finished. I like her granddaughter. The compliment, delivered with such quiet sincerity, cracked something in Zahara's carefully maintained composure. She felt exposed, seen in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. I should check on my team, she said, taking a step back. We have packing up to do. Have dinner with me tomorrow, he said. Not a question, but not quite a demand either. There's a little place in the West Village that makes soul food that might even impress your grandmother. Every instinct honed by years of putting her career first screamed at her to say no. This man could be a distraction she couldn't afford, a complication in her carefully ordered life. But her grandmother's voice echoed in her head. Sometimes the best recipes come from unexpected combinations. I'll think about it, she said, surprising herself with her honesty. He pulled out a business card, thick cream cardstock with elegant black lettering, and wrote something on the back. My personal number, he said, holding it out to her, in case you decide to take a chance. Their fingers brushed as she took the card, and that same electricity crackled between them. She tucked it into her clutch without looking at it, unwilling to appear too eager. Good night, Mr. Caldwell, she said, turning to leave. Soren, he called after her, and Zahara, sweet dreams. Later, in the quiet of her hotel room, Zahara sat at the window overlooking the city lights. The business card lay on her bedside table, both promise and warning. Her fingers found their rhythm against the window glass as she remembered the way he'd said her name, the intensity in his eyes when he listened to her stories. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ash. How was the gala? Any interesting people? Zahara looked at the card again, thinking of steel blue eyes and quiet strength, of the way the air seemed to charge when he was near. For the first time in years, she felt something crack in the walls she'd built around her heart. You could say that, she typed back, and smiled into the New York night. The morning after the gala, Zahara woke to the soft ping of her phone. Through bleary eyes, she read the message that would change everything. Good morning, Zahara. The view from my office makes me think of golden dresses and passion fruit soufflés. Soren. She sat up in her hotel bed, suddenly wide awake. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she debated responding. The rational part of her brain, the part that had built her business from scratch, warned her to maintain professional distance. But something else, something that felt like her grandmother's gentle nudging, made her type, Good morning, Mr. Caldwell. Careful. Passion fruit can be addictive. His response was immediate. So I'm discovering. Dinner tonight. Zahara's heart raced as she remembered their conversation from the night before, the soul food place in the West Village, the intensity in his steel blue eyes when he'd asked, the way his presence had made her feel simultaneously powerful and vulnerable. I have meetings until 6, she typed, then added, but I could be free after. I'll send a car, 7:30. She stared at the message, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. Sometimes the sweetest things in life come from taking risks, but Zahara hadn't built her empire by taking risks with her heart. She'd done it through careful planning, through maintaining control. Still, as she went through her morning routine, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was shifting in her carefully ordered world. The New York sunrise painted her hotel room in shades of possibility, and for once, she let herself imagine what it might be like to want something beyond her next business goal. Her meetings flew by in a blur of contracts and handshakes. 3 hotel chains wanted to feature her desserts in their restaurants. A major food magazine wanted to do a spread on her fusion of Afro-Brazilian traditions with French pastry techniques. Everything she'd worked for was falling into place, yet her mind kept drifting to steel blue eyes and the ghost of cologne. At 7:25, she stood before the mirror in her hotel room, scrutinizing her reflection. She'd chosen a deep burgundy wrap dress that complemented her skin tone and hugged her curves without being obvious about it. Her box braids were arranged in an elegant updo, with a few strands framing her face. The overall effect was sophisticated, but approachable, exactly the image she wanted to project. The text came at 7:30 exactly. Car, waiting downstairs. The driver opened the door to a sleek black Mercedes, and Zahara slid into the leather interior, her heart beating a rhythm against her ribs. The car wound through Manhattan's evening traffic, finally stopping before a brownstone with warm light spilling from its windows. Soren waited on the steps, his commanding presence softened by the evening shadows. He'd changed from his corporate armor into dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made his eyes look stormy. The sight of him, more casual but no less intense, made her breath catch. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his hand to help her up the steps. The restaurant was intimate, with exposed brick walls and jazz playing softly in the background. Their table was tucked into a corner, candlelight dancing between them. "The owner's grandmother was from Georgia," Soren explained as they were seated. "Like yours." The fact that he'd remembered that detail from their conversation made something warm unfurl in Zahara's chest. "You did your homework." "I always do." He studied her over the rim of his water glass. "It served me well in business." "Is that what this is?" she asked, meeting his gaze. "Business?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Would it be easier if it was?" Before she could answer, the owner herself appeared, a woman with silver hair and knowing eyes who introduced herself as Miss Ruby. She took one look at them and declared, "You'll need my special menu tonight." What followed was a parade of soul food elevated to art. Black-eyed pea fritters with honey jalapeno sauce, butter-poached crab over stone-ground grits, and collard greens that made Zahara close her eyes in pleasure. "Good as your grandmother's?" Soren asked, watching her savor each bite. "Different," Zahara said diplomatically. "But special in its own way." She studied him as he cut into his short ribs. "Speaking of family, you want to know about mine?" It wasn't a question. His hand moved to his tie, only to find it wasn't there. Instead, his fingers brushed the barely visible scar on his eyebrow. "Not much to tell. Parents died in a car accident when I was 17. No siblings." The matter-of-fact way he delivered this information told Zahara more than the words themselves. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "It was a long time ago." His eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw past his carefully constructed walls to the loss beneath. "Made me who I am today." "And who is that?" she asked, genuinely curious. He considered her question while pouring them both more water. "Someone who learned early that control is safety. That success is the best revenge against fate." His lips quirked. "Your turn. What made you choose pastry? Besides my grandmother." Zahara's fingers found their rhythm against the tablecloth. "I love the precision of it, the way you can take basic ingredients and transform them into something magical. But more than that," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "I love how dessert makes people feel. It's pure joy, pure pleasure, no pretense. Like you," he said quietly. The intensity of his gaze made her throat tight. "You don't know me well enough to say that. I'd like to." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing her wrist where her Adinkra tattoo peeked out from her sleeve. "If you'll let me." The touch sent electricity through her veins, making her pull back slightly. "I should warn you, I'm not looking for anything serious. My business is my priority right now." Noted, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he wasn't deterred. "Tell me about your latest projects." They spent the next hour trading stories, her plans for expansion, his latest tech innovations. She found herself drawn in by his quick mind and dry wit, the way he listened like every word mattered. When Miss Ruby brought out peach cobbler with bourbon vanilla ice cream, Zahara couldn't help but analyze the recipe. "Nutmeg," she said after a thoughtful bite. "And is that cardamom?" "My secret ingredient," Miss Ruby winked. "Takes it from good to unforgettable." "Like other unexpected combinations?" Soren murmured, his eyes never leaving Zahara's face. The evening passed too quickly, and soon they were standing outside in the cool night air. The street was quiet, the kind of New York moment that felt almost magical. "Let me take you back to your hotel," Soren said, but it wasn't really a question. His hand rested lightly on the small of her back as he guided her to his waiting car. The ride was silent, charged with unspoken possibilities. When they pulled up to her hotel, he walked her to the lobby, his presence both thrilling and unnerving. "Thank you for dinner," she said, turning to face him. "It was unexpected." He stepped closer, and suddenly the lobby felt very small. "That's one word for it. She looked up at him, aware of every inch of space between them. His hand came up to brush a stray braid from her cheek, the touch feather-light but electric. "Have breakfast with me tomorrow." "I have an early flight back to Atlanta," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Change it." His fingers lingered near her face. "Stay another day." For a moment, she was tempted. The heat in his eyes promised adventures, discoveries, possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider in years. But the practical voice in her head, the one that had guided her to success, warned her about the dangers of mixing business with pleasure. "I can't," she said finally. "I have meetings with the hotel chains to prepare for." Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment, respect, before he stepped back. "Another time, then." "Maybe," she offered him a small smile. "If the universe aligns." "I don't believe in leaving things to the universe," he said, his voice low and intent. "When I want something, I pursue it." The implication made her heart race. "Good night, Mr. Caldwell." "Soren," he corrected, then surprised her by bringing her hand to his lips. "Sweet dreams, Zahara." She watched him walk away, her skin tingling where his lips had touched. Only when she was alone in her room did she let out the breath she'd been holding. Her phone buzzed, a text from Ash. "Well, how was dinner with Mr. CEO?" Zahara stared at the message, unsure how to describe the evening. How could she explain the way Soren had looked at her like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve? The electricity that had sparked between them with every accidental touch. The way he'd listened to her dreams as if they were as important as his own. "How complicated?" she typed back finally. "The best things usually are," came Ash's immediate response. "Question is, are you ready for complicated?" Zahara walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Her reflection stared back at her, successful, independent, carefully controlled. But beneath that familiar image, she saw something else. A woman on the edge of change, teetering between safety and possibility. Her phone buzzed again. "Just landed a major contract in Atlanta. Looks like I'll be in your city more often than expected." Soren. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. "Life's sweetest moments come when you least expect them." "Welcome to Atlanta," she typed back, and hit send before she could change her mind. As she got ready for bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully ordered world was about to change. Like a perfectly timed souffle, something was rising in her life, beautiful, precarious, and impossible to control. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that this was just the beginning, that the universe had plans that would make her question everything she thought she knew about love, control, and the price of playing it safe. The Atlanta sun painted golden stripes across Zahara's kitchen floor as she reviewed contracts from the New York hotel chains. 2 weeks had passed since the gala, and her empire was expanding faster than she'd dreamed possible. But it wasn't business opportunities making her heart race every time her phone buzzed. "Another text from your CEO?" Ash teased, perched on a stool at the test kitchen counter. She was sampling Zahara's latest creation, a guava and cream cheese macaron that fused Brazilian and French influences. "He's not my CEO," Zahara corrected automatically, but she couldn't hide her smile as she checked her phone. "Dinner tonight? My meeting's finished early." It had become their pattern over the past 2 weeks. Since his business brought him to Atlanta 3 days a week, they'd fallen into an easy rhythm of shared meals and long conversations. Despite her initial reservations, Zahara found herself looking forward to these moments. The way his eyes lit up when she explained a new recipe, how he remembered every detail she shared about her grandmother, the subtle ways he found to touch her without seeming to try. "Earth to Z," Ash's voice broke through her thoughts. "Sarah, girl, you've got it bad." "I've got nothing except a busy schedule and a new potential client," Zahara protested, but her fingers were already typing a response. "My kitchen, 8 p.m. I'm testing a new recipe." His reply was immediate. "I'll bring the wine." "A client who brings wine and looks at you like you're the sweetest thing on your dessert menu." Ash raised an eyebrow. "Sure, keep telling yourself that." Zahara was saved from responding by a wave of unexpected nausea. She gripped the counter, waiting for it to pass. These moments had been happening more frequently lately. A strange dizziness, a sensitivity to smells that had never bothered her before. "You okay?" Ash's teasing tone turned concerned. "That's the 3rd time this week I've seen you go pale." "Just tired." Zahara waved off her friend's concern. "These hotel contracts are keeping me busy." But as she turned back to her work, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. She'd been so focused on her expanding business and if she was honest, on Soren, that she hadn't paid attention to the subtle changes in her body. The day passed in a blur of recipe testing and business calls. By the time evening approached, Zahara had almost convinced herself that her earlier queasiness was just stress. She changed into a casual burgundy dress that made her skin glow and let her box braids fall loose around her shoulders, the way Soren seemed to prefer them. At exactly 8:00, her doorbell rang. Soren stood there, looking devastatingly handsome in casual clothes, dark jeans and a light blue button-down that made his eyes more grey than blue. He held up a bottle of wine and something else, a small package wrapped in gold paper. "What's this?" she asked, taking both items as she led him into her kitchen. "Open it," he said, his voice warm with anticipation. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with tiny chef's tools as charms. "I saw it and thought of you," he said simply. The gesture was unexpected, intimate in a way their casual dinners hadn't been. "It's beautiful," she whispered, letting him fasten it around her wrist just above her Adinkra tattoo. His fingers lingered on her skin, sending shivers up her arm. Beautiful things, for a beautiful woman. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility, until the timer on her oven broke the spell. Zahara turned quickly to retrieve her latest experiment, individual chocolate soufflés with a molten center of dulce de leche. "Your grandmother's recipe?" Soren asked, watching her work with his usual intensity. "Inspired by her," Zahara said, carefully plating the desserts. "She always said chocolate makes everything better. Wise woman." He moved closer, ostensibly to observe her technique, but she felt the heat of him all along her back. "Though I can think of other things that improve any situation." Before she could respond, another wave of dizziness hit her. The room spun slightly, and she gripped the counter for support. Soren's hands were immediately on her waist, steadying her. "Zahara!" The concern in his voice was palpable. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." She tried to smile, but the kitchen suddenly felt too warm, too small. "Just got dizzy for a moment." His frown deepened as he guided her to a stool. "This has happened before." She started to shake her head, then thought better of it. "A few times. It's probably just stress from the expansion. When was your last full meal?" His CEO voice was back, the one that expected immediate answers. Zahara tried to remember, but the day had been a blur of taste testing and meetings. "I had some macarons with ash." "That's not a meal." He was already moving through her kitchen with familiar ease, pulling ingredients from her fridge. "Sounds you need protein, not just sugar. Are you cooking for me?" The idea was both amusing and touching. "Consider it self-preservation," he said, his lips quirking. "Can't have my favorite chef passing out before I get to taste that soufflé." She watched him work, this powerful man who commanded a tech empire now making her a simple omelette in her kitchen. His movements were precise, efficient, just like everything else about him. The domesticity of the moment made her heart ache with unexpected longing. "Tell me about your day," he said as he cooked, his voice gentle. "Did the London hotel chain sign?" She let herself be drawn into conversation, the familiar pattern of their evenings, settling around them like a comfortable blanket. But something felt different tonight. The air was charged with unspoken words, with possibilities neither of them had acknowledged. When he set the omelette in front of her, the smell hit her with unexpected force. Her stomach lurched, and she barely made it to the bathroom in time. Soren held her hair back as she was sick, his other hand rubbing soothing circles on her back. When she was done, he helped her rinse her mouth and led her to her living room couch. "This isn't stress," he said firmly, his eyes searching her face. "How long has this been happening?" Zahara's mind was racing, counting days, remembering symptoms she'd dismissed. The night of the gala, their passionate encounter after that second dinner in New York. Her period, always regular as clockwork, was late. "Oh God," she whispered, the reality crashing over her like a wave. Soren's face changed as he watched understanding dawn in her eyes. His hand, still holding hers, tightened slightly. "Zahara, I need—" She stood up too quickly, swaying again. "I need to go to the pharmacy." "I'll drive," he said immediately, but she shook her head. "No, I need to do this alone." She saw the hurt flash across his face and softened her voice. "Please, Soren, give me tonight." He studied her for a long moment, his eyes stormy with emotions she couldn't read. Finally, he nodded. "Call me when you know. Whatever the result, whatever you decide, call me." After he left, Zahara sat in her quiet kitchen, staring at the uneaten soufflés growing cold on the counter. Her hand drifted to her stomach, wondering if at this very moment a new life, or lives, was growing inside her. The drive to the pharmacy was a blur. She bought 3 different tests, refusing to meet the cashier's eyes. Back home, she followed the instructions with trembling hands, then sat on the edge of her bathtub, watching the seconds tick by on her phone. When the timer chimed, she looked at all 3 tests. Each one showed the same result, positive. Her first thought, strangely, was of her grandmother. "Life gives you the ingredients," she always said, "but you choose what to make with them." With shaking fingers, she picked up her phone and typed a message to Soren. "We need to talk." His response came instantly. "I'm already on my way back." Zahara walked to her kitchen window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The Atlanta skyline sparkled in the distance, unchanged by the earthquake that had just rocked her world. Her hand found the tiny chef's tools on her new bracelet, then drifted to her Adinkra tattoo, symbols of strength she would need now more than ever. Her phone buzzed again. Ash, with her usual perfect timing. "Hey, babe, how was dinner with Mr. Not Your CEO? Zahara stared at the message, tears blurring her vision. How could she explain that everything had changed, that her carefully planned life was about to take a turn she'd never expected, that she was carrying the child of a man she was falling for but barely knew? A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Through the peephole, she saw Soren, still in his casual clothes, but with his hair messed, like he'd been running his hands through it. When she opened the door, the look in his eyes told her he already knew. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "you're not alone." Zahara felt something crack in her carefully constructed walls. As tears began to fall, Soren pulled her into his arms, his heart beating steady and strong against her cheek. Outside, the Atlanta night wrapped around them like a blanket, while inside, their world shifted on its axis, preparing for a future neither of them had planned, but both would have to face. The morning sun filtered through Zahara's kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the granite countertops, where 3 pregnancy tests still lay lined up like soldiers. She hadn't slept, spending the night in anxious conversation with Soren until exhaustion had finally sent him home at dawn. Now, in the harsh light of day, reality was setting in. Her phone buzzed, a text from her doctor's office confirming her emergency appointment. Another from Soren. "Meeting pushed to 9. I'll pick you up at 7:30 for the appointment." Zahara's fingers found their familiar rhythm against the counter as she stared at his message. Part of her wanted to tell him not to come, to handle this on her own as she'd handled everything else in her life, but another part, the part still reeling from the news, was grateful for his steady presence. "Okay," she typed back simply. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of shower, dress, and trying to keep down breakfast. When Soren's sleek black Mercedes pulled up, Zahara took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked out to meet him. He looked as if he hadn't slept either, his usual impeccable appearance slightly rumpled, but his eyes were alert and focused as he helped her into the car, his hand lingering protectively at her elbow. "Did you eat?" he asked, pulling into traffic. "Tried to," she managed a weak smile. "Apparently your child isn't a fan of toast." The words hung in the air between them. Your child, their child. The reality of it still felt surreal. The doctor's office was quiet this early, and they were taken back almost immediately. Zahara changed into a paper gown, acutely aware of Soren's presence as he sat in a chair by the wall, his leg bouncing slightly, the first sign of nervousness she'd ever seen in him. Dr. Wilson entered with a warm smile, clipboard in hand. "Well, Miss Monroe, let's see what we've got here." The cold gel on her stomach made Zahara flinch. She fixed her eyes on the ceiling, trying to maintain composure as the ultrasound wand moved across her abdomen. Suddenly, a rapid whooshing sound filled the room. "There's the heartbeat," Dr. Wilson said, then paused. "Wait." Zahara's own heart stopped. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," the doctor assured her, moving the wand slightly. "But I'm hearing—" "Yes, there it is. Multiple heartbeats." Soren was on his feet instantly. "Multiple, doctor." Wilson turned the screen so they could see. "Congratulations. You're having triplets." The world tilted on its axis. Zahara heard Soren's sharp intake of breath, felt his hand find hers and squeeze. 3 babies, 3 heartbeats, 3 lives already depending on her. The rest of the appointment passed in a daze of information, due dates, risk factors, dietary recommendations. Zahara nodded mechanically, but her mind was racing ahead to all the implications. Her business expansion, her carefully planned future, everything would have to change. Back in the car, silence stretched between them until Soren finally spoke. "Move in with me." Zahara turned to stare at him. "What?" "My house has plenty of room, the best security system available, and it's closer to the best hospitals." He was using his CEO voice, the one that expected problems to be solved efficiently. "Can't it make sense?" "Make sense?" Zahara felt something hot and angry rise in her chest. "Is that what this is to you? A problem to be solved?" His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Of course not. I'm trying to be practical." "Practical?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "There's nothing practical about this situation, Soren. We barely know each other. We've been dating, if you can even call it that, for less than a month. And now we're having triplets, which is exactly why you need support," he said, his voice maddeningly reasonable. "You can't handle this alone." "Can't handle it." The words hit her like a slap. "I've built my business from nothing. I've handled everything life has thrown at me. I don't need you to swoop in and save me." "This isn't about saving you," he snapped, finally showing emotion. "This is about our children." "Our children," she repeated softly. "The three of them. God, what am I going to do about the hotel contracts, the expansion?" "Let me help," Soren said, pulling into her driveway. "We can figure this out together." "Together?" She turned to face him fully. "There is no together, Soren. There's you with your perfect plan to fix everything, and there's me trying to figure out how to keep my dreams from falling apart." "Your dreams aren't falling apart," he said, reaching for her hand. "They're just changing direction." She pulled away from his touch. "That's easy for you to say. Your life won't change. You can just write checks and visit on weekends." His face hardened. "Is that really what you think of me?" "I don't know what to think," she admitted. "I don't know you, not really. A few dinners, some good conversation, one passionate night. That's not enough to build a life on. Then let me prove you wrong." His voice softened. "Marry me." Zahara felt as if all the air had been sucked from the car. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated. "We can provide a stable home for our children, combine our resources, our lives, make this work." "A marriage of convenience?" She felt sick, and it had nothing to do with morning sickness. "Is that your solution?" "It's the logical next step." "Logic." She unbuckled her seatbelt with shaking hands. "Here, there's nothing logical about bringing 3 lives into the world. Nothing logical about love or family or any of this." "Zahara, wait." He reached for her, but she was already opening the car door. "I need time," she said, not looking at him. "Time to think, to process. Please, just give me that." She didn't wait for his response, walking quickly to her front door. Only when she was safely inside did she let the tears fall. Her hand drifted to her stomach, where 3 tiny lives were growing, oblivious to the turmoil around them. Her phone buzzed. Ash calling. Zahara let it go to voicemail, not ready to share her news with anyone else. Another text from Soren appeared. "I'm not going anywhere. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here." She sank onto her couch, emotionally exhausted. Her grandmother's words came back to her. Life's sweetest recipes often start with bitter ingredients. Evening found her in her test kitchen, methodically creating macarons, the precise measurements and techniques giving her a sense of control she desperately needed. Each perfect shell was a small victory, a reminder that she could still create something beautiful, even when her world was spinning out of control. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Soren. "Just had my assistant clear my schedule for the next month. Whatever you decide, whatever you need, I'm here, not because of logic or convenience, but because I want to be." Zahara stared at the message. Her heart conflicted. She thought of the way he'd held her hand during the ultrasound, the genuine awe in his eyes when they heard the heartbeats. Maybe there was more to him than the controlled CEO exterior he showed the world, but his proposal, born of duty rather than love, still stung. She deserved more than a marriage of convenience. Their children deserved more. "I need time," she typed back finally, "to figure out who I am in this new reality. Please understand." His response was immediate. "I understand, but don't shut me out. They're my children too." Zahara placed her phone face down, turning back to her macarons. Tomorrow she would have to face reality, tell Ash, call her grandmother, figure out how to manage her business through a high-risk pregnancy. But tonight, she would lose herself in the precise art of French pastry, finding comfort in the one thing she could still control. As she worked, her hand occasionally drifted to her stomach, wondering about the 3 tiny lives growing there. Would they inherit her creativity, his determination, Would they love sugar and spice like their mother, or prefer logic and order like their father? Only time would tell. For now she had decisions to make, a future to reimagine, and a heart to protect, or perhaps, if she was brave enough, to risk opening fully for the first time. Zahara stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, taking deep breaths to quell another wave of morning sickness. The irony wasn't lost on her. 3 babies, 3 times the symptoms. Her phone buzzed on the counter, displaying Ash's name for the 5th time that morning. She couldn't avoid her best friend forever. "Girl, if you don't answer this call, I'm coming over with a SWAT team," Ash's text read. With a sigh, Zahara pressed the call button. "I'm alive," she said before Ash could start. "Barely, from the sound of your voice. What's going on? You've been MIA for 3 days, and your assistant said you're rescheduling all your tastings this week." Zahara sank onto her bedroom chair, fingers finding their familiar rhythm against the armrest. "Can you come over? There's something I need to tell you." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Ash said, then added, "Should I bring ice cream?" "No ice cream," Zahara managed a weak laugh. "Just come quickly." While waiting for Ash, Zahara checked her messages, several from Soren, each more concerned than the last. "Hope you're feeling better this morning. My nutritionist sent some pregnancy-safe recipes, sending them to you. Called the best OB/GYN in Atlanta. She has an opening next week. Please let me know you're okay." His care was evident in every message, but it also highlighted their fundamental difference, his need to fix everything, her need to process on her own terms. The doorbell rang, and Zahara opened it to find Ash looking worried but determined. "Spill," she said, walking straight to the kitchen and putting on the kettle for tea. Zahara took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." Ash froze mid-reach for the mugs. "What? With triplets?" The mug clattered onto the counter. "What?" And Soren proposed. "What?" Ash gripped the counter. "Okay, back up, way back up. Start with how this happened. Well, when 2 people—" "Don't you dare sass me right now," Ash cut her off, but there was a smile tugging at her lips. "You know what I mean. Soren, Mr. CEO, when did this happen? Remember that second dinner in New York?" Zahara's cheeks warmed at the memory. One thing led to another. "Clearly 3 things," Ash muttered, then sobered. "How are you feeling about all this?" The simple question broke something in Zahara. Tears she'd been holding back for days started falling. Terrified, excited, overwhelmed. "I built my whole life around my career, and now—" Ash wrapped her in a tight hug. "And now, you're going to be an amazing mother, while still being an amazing chef. These things aren't mutually exclusive. Try telling that to morning sickness," Zahara said through her tears. "I can barely look at food some days." "And Soren? You said he proposed?" Zahara pulled back, wiping her eyes. "A marriage of convenience, to provide stability for the babies." Ouch, Ash winced. "That's exactly what you'd expect from someone who treats everything like a business decision." Zahara smiled sadly. "Yeah. Have you told your grandmother yet?" The question made Zahara's heart clench. "I'm calling her today. She'll probably say this is the universe's way of teaching me to let go of control." "Smart woman. Your grandmother," Ash said, then hesitated. "And what about Soren? Beyond the world's least romantic proposal, how's he handling this?" "He's—" Zahara gestured to her phone, where another message from him had just appeared. "He's trying, in his way, but he wants to fix everything immediately. Move me into his house, plan the next 18 years, probably color-code the babies and schedules before they're even born. Control freaks in love," Ash mused. "You two are more alike than you realize." "We're not in love," Zahara protested automatically. "No?" Ash raised an eyebrow. "Then why does your face soften every time your phone buzzes with his messages?" Before Zahara could respond, her doorbell rang again. Through the peephole, she saw Soren, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I know you asked for time," he said when she opened the door, "but I needed to see you." He looked different, less CEO, more human. His usual perfectly pressed suit was replaced by casual clothes, and his hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it. "Come in," Zahara said softly. "Ash is here." "Perfect timing," Ash said, grabbing her purse. "I was just leaving." "No, stay." Soren surprised them both by saying, "Please, you're Zahara's family, and family should be part of this conversation." Something in Zahara's chest tightened at his words. He was trying, in his own way, to step out of his comfort zone. "I've been thinking," he said once they were all seated in Zahara's living room, "about what you said, about not knowing each other. You're right. Zahara exchanged a glance with Ash, who was pretending to be very interested in her tea. I don't want a marriage of convenience, he continued. I want a chance to do this right, to know you, really know you, before we make any decisions about our future. What are you saying? Zahara asked carefully. I'm saying. He ran a hand through his hair, confirming her theory about its disheveled state. Let me court you properly. No pressure, no proposals, just two people getting to know each other while preparing to be parents. Ash made a small sound of approval, quickly disguised as a cough. And the living arrangements? Zahara asked, remembering his insistence about her moving in. Whatever makes you comfortable, he said, though she could see it cost him something to relinquish that control. But please, let me be involved. Doctor's appointments, preparations, decisions about the babies. I want to be part of it all. The sincerity in his voice was impossible to doubt. This was a different Soren from the one who had proposed marriage like a business merger. Okay, Zahara said softly. We can try that. The smile that broke across his face transformed his features, making him look younger, more vulnerable. Thank you. This is beautiful and all, Ash interjected, but can we address the elephant in the room? When are you telling your grandmother? As if on cue, Zahara's phone rang, displaying her grandmother's smiling face. Now, apparently, she said, her heart racing. Would you both stay while I tell her? Soren moved to sit beside her on the couch, his presence steady and reassuring. Ash positioned herself on her other side, squeezing her hand. Vo, Zahara said when she answered. There's something I need to tell you. The next few minutes were a blur of Portuguese exclamations, joyful tears, and her grandmother's wisdom flowing through the phone. But minha querida, her grandmother said finally, God gives us the ingredients. What we make with them is up to us. And you, my Zahara, have always known how to make something sweet from any situation. After the call ended, Zahara sat in silence, processing. Soren's hand found hers, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. Your grandmother is very wise, he said softly. So she also said if you don't marry me eventually, she'll put a curse on you. Zahara couldn't help but smile. Then I better make sure I earn the right to ask again, he replied, his eyes intense. Properly this time. On that note, Ash stood up. I'm actually leaving now. You two have plenty to talk about. After Ash left, silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, but full of possibility. I have a doctor's appointment next week, Zahara said finally. If you want to come, I'll be there, he promised. For everything. As if to prove his point, he pulled out his phone and pulled up his calendar. I've already rearranged my schedule to be in Atlanta 4 days a week instead of 3. And I've researched the best prenatal yoga classes, nutrition specialists, and pediatricians in the city. Zahara couldn't help but laugh. Some things never change. He looked sheepish. Saz, too much. No, she surprised herself by saying, it's who you are. Just like my need to process things alone is who I am. Maybe we can meet in the middle. I'd like that, he said softly. They spent the next hour talking, really talking, about their fears, their hopes, their very different ways of handling stress. He told her about losing his parents, about learning to control everything he could to avoid feeling that helpless again. She shared her struggles as a black woman in a white-dominated industry, her need to prove herself constantly. When he finally left, it was with a gentle kiss to her forehead and a promise to call later. Zahara watched him go, her hand resting on her stomach where their 3 tiny miracles grew. Her phone buzzed one last time that night, a text from Ash. Girl, that man is in love with you. He just doesn't know it yet. Zahara looked out at the Atlanta skyline, thinking about ingredients and recipes, about control and letting go, about the strange ways life had of mixing things up just when you thought you had the perfect formula. Maybe, just maybe, they could make something beautiful from this unexpected situation, something even sweeter than either of them had planned. 2 months into her pregnancy, Zahara found herself adapting to a new normal. Her morning sickness had evolved into all-day nausea, triggered by the very scents she once loved. Her test kitchen, once her sanctuary, had become a minefield of overwhelming aromas. But the biggest change wasn't physical. It was the constant, steady presence of Soren in her life. True to his word, he had been there for everything. Doctor's appointments, midnight cravings, and most surprisingly, her continued work in the kitchen. He'd even installed an advanced air filtration system in her test kitchen to help with the nausea, though he couldn't quite hide his concern whenever she insisted on working. "You should be resting," he said one evening, watching her pipe delicate rosettes onto a wedding cake sample. "I'm pregnant, not invalid," she replied, though her back ached from standing. "Besides, these contracts won't fulfill themselves." He moved behind her, his hands finding the knots in her shoulders with practiced ease. Over the past weeks, they'd developed a comfortable intimacy, small touches, shared looks, the kind of closeness that grew naturally rather than being forced. "At least let me help," he murmured, his breath warm against her neck. "You, in my kitchen." She turned to face him, amused. "Mr. Technology wants to learn pastry. I'm a quick study." His eyes held that intensity she'd come to know well. "And it means more time with you." Before she could respond, her assistant burst in. "Miss Monroe, there's someone here to see Mr. Caldwell. She says it's urgent." Soren frowned. "I didn't tell anyone I'd be here." But the answer walked through the door before anyone could stop it. Camille Dubois entered Zahara's kitchen like she owned it, her Louboutins clicking against the tile floor. Tall, elegant, and undeniably beautiful, she carried herself with the confidence of old money and established power. "Soren, darling," she said, her voice carrying a hint of French accent. "Your assistant said I might find you here." Zahara felt Soren stiffen beside her, his hand instinctively moving to his tie. "Camille, what are you doing in Atlanta?" "The merger, of course." Camille's eyes swept over Zahara, taking in her chef's coat and the slight swell of her stomach that was just becoming visible. "Your father's board is getting impatient. They sent me to expedite things." Zahara's fingers found their rhythm against her workstation, a sharp staccato of anxiety. "Merger? Surely Soren told you." Camille's smile was perfectly pleasant, perfectly poisonous. "Our families have been planning this for years. The merger of our companies, sealed with a marriage. Very old school, very traditional." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Zahara gripped her workstation harder, feeling the blood drain from her face. Soren moved toward her, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Camille," his voice held a warning edge, "this isn't the time or place." "When is it ever? With you?" Camille sighed dramatically. "You've been avoiding this conversation for months. The board is pressing for an answer. Your father's legacy." "My father is dead." Soren cut her off sharply. "And his plans died with him." "Did they?" Camille's gaze flickered to Zahara again. "Or have you just found a more interesting distraction?" The implication hung in the air like poison. Zahara felt her chest tighten, memories of every time she'd been dismissed, underestimated, or treated as less than rushing back. "Ms. Dubois," she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her heart. "My kitchen is for creating, not corporate politics. I'll have to ask you to leave." "Of course." Camille smiled, that perfect smile again. "I wouldn't want to upset your condition." "Soren, the board meets next week. They'll expect an answer." She left as dramatically as she'd arrived, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and unspoken threats. Silence stretched between Zahara and Soren, thick with questions and accusations. Finally, she turned to face him, her hands protectively covering her stomach. "Were you ever going to tell me?" "It's not what you think," he started, but she cut him off. "What I think?" Her laugh held no humor. "I think you've been playing house with me while an arranged marriage hangs over your head. I think you've been keeping secrets that affect not just us, but our children." "The merger was my father's plan," he said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I've been fighting it since before I met you, but you didn't tell me." The hurt in her voice made him flinch. "All these weeks of getting closer, of trying to trust each other, and you kept this hidden. Because it doesn't matter." He moved toward her, but she stepped back. "Camille, the merger, my father's plans, none of it matters. What matters is us, our family. Family requires trust, Soren." She felt tears threatening but held them back. "How can I trust you when you hide something this big?" "I was protecting you." "No," she cut him off again. "Just you were protecting yourself, controlling the situation, just like you always do." The truth of her words hung between them. Soren's face showed a conflict she'd never seen before, the businessman warring with the man who'd been learning to open his heart. "The board meeting is next week," she said quietly. "You should go. Figure out what you want." "I know what I want," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Who I want. Do you?" She met his eyes steadily. "So because from where I stand, you're still trying to please a ghost while building a future with me. That's not fair to anyone, not to me, not to our children, and not to yourself." He reached for her again, and this time she let him take her hand. "Let me fix this. Some things can't be fixed with money or power," she said softly. "Some things need time, and truth, and trust." A knock at the door interrupted them, her next client meeting. Reality rushing back in. "Go," she said, pulling her hand away. "Deal with your board, your legacy, whatever you need to do. But don't come back until you're ready to be completely honest. With them, with me, and with yourself." "Zahara, please," she whispered. "I need time too." After he left, Zahara threw herself into work, channeling her emotions into her craft. She created 6 new desserts, each more complex than the last, until exhaustion finally forced her to stop. At home, she found a package waiting, a delivery from her grandmother. Inside was a worn recipe book and a note. "Sometimes the most important ingredient is patience. Let things rise in their own time." Her phone buzzed with messages from Soren. "I should have told you everything from the start. The merger, Camille, my father's expectations. They're part of a life I've been trying to escape. Please don't shut me out. Not now. And finally, I choose you. I've always chosen you. Let me prove it." Zahara sat in her quiet kitchen, one hand on her growing belly, the other tracing the Adinkra symbol on her wrist. 3 lives depended on the choices she and Soren made now. 3 hearts beating beneath her own, trusting her to make the right decisions. Her phone buzzed again. Ash this time. "You okay? Want me to come over?" "No," she typed back. "I need to think. About whether love is enough when trust is broken." Ash's response was immediate. "Love is always enough. But it has to be real love, not the convenient kind." Zahara looked out at the Atlanta skyline, thinking about ingredients and timing, about trust and truth, about the difference between fixing something and letting it heal naturally. Somewhere in the city, Soren was probably in his office, trying to control this situation like he controlled everything else. But some things couldn't be controlled. Some things needed to be felt, faced, and fought for. The question was, were they both ready for that fight? The boardroom of Caldwell Technologies felt colder than Soren remembered. 12 pairs of eyes watched him from around the mahogany table, his father's old friends and business partners waiting for him to fulfill a promise he'd never made. Camille sat at the far end, perfectly poised in Chanel, her presence a reminder of everything he was about to walk away from. "The merger agreement has been in place for years," board member Harrison was saying, his voice heavy with disapproval. "Your father—" "My father is gone," Soren cut him off, standing to his full height. "And I'm not him." The past week without Zahara had been hell. He'd thrown himself into preparation for this moment, examining every aspect of his life and the legacy he'd been trying to uphold. Each night he'd drafted messages to her that went unsent, knowing she deserved more than words on a screen. This merger would secure the company's future, another board member argued. "The Dubois connection. The company's future is already secure," Soren interrupted, clicking through his presentation. "Our latest tech developments have pushed us ahead of competitors. Stock prices are at an all-time high. We don't need this merger. It's not just about business." Camille spoke up, her voice silk over steel. "Our families were close friends," Soren finished. "And that friendship ended when my parents died, and your father tried to buy controlling interest in our company." A murmur ran through the room. This was old history, carefully buried under years of polite business dealings. "Soren," Camille's voice held a warning note. "Think carefully about what you're doing." He turned to face her fully, seeing her clearly for the first time. She was beautiful, accomplished, and as trapped by expectations as he had been. "I am thinking carefully," he said, softer now. "I'm thinking about the kind of man I want to be, the kind of father I want to be." Another murmur, stronger this time. Only a few people knew about Zahara's pregnancy. He'd been protecting her privacy, but now it was time for complete honesty. "I'm going to be a father," he announced to the room, "to triplets, with a woman who has taught me that real legacy isn't about mergers or family names. It's about courage and truth and choosing love over obligation." "The woman from the papers?" Harrison asked. "The chef?" "Zahara Monroe," Soren said proudly. "And yes, she's a chef. She's also a brilliant businesswoman who built her empire from nothing. She has more integrity and innovation in her little finger than any merger could provide." "You can't be serious." Camille stood, her perfect composure cracking. "You're throwing away years of planning for a pregnancy." "No," Soren's voice was firm. "I'm choosing happiness over duty, love over convenience." And if anyone in this room has a problem with that, I suggest you review your stock options now. He clicked to his final slide, a comprehensive plan for the company's future without the Dubois merger. Every detail meticulously researched, every angle covered. He might be choosing love, but he was still Soren Caldwell. He never came unprepared. The vote is simple, he concluded. Either you support my vision for this company's future, or you can sell your shares back to me at premium. I have the capital and the backing to buy out anyone who disagrees with my direction. Silence fell over the room. Soren felt lighter than he had in years, the weight of his father's expectations finally lifting from his shoulders. I'm sorry, Camille, he said sincerely. You deserve better than an arranged marriage too. Something shifted in her expression, understanding, perhaps even relief. Your father would be furious, she said, but there was no bite in her words. My father would want me to be happy, Soren replied. It just took me too long to realize that. The vote was quick and decisive. Most board members, seeing his determination and the strength of his alternative plans, sided with him. Those who didn't were given generous buyout offers. As the room cleared, Harrison approached him. Your father would be proud, the older man said gruffly. Not of the decision, maybe, but of the way you handled it, like a true leader. Soren nodded, throat tight with emotion, but he couldn't celebrate yet. The hardest conversation still lay ahead. He found himself driving to Zahara's test kitchen, knowing she'd be there despite the late hour. She always baked when she was stressed, a habit he'd come to understand and love. The kitchen was warm and fragrant with the smell of vanilla and spice. Zahara stood at her workstation, hair tied back, completely focused on the delicate sugar work before her. Even with her chef's coat stretched slightly over her growing belly, she moved with grace and precision. Your security system recognized me, he said softly, not wanting to startle her. I never removed your clearance, she replied without looking up. I ended it, he said, moving closer. The merger, the arrangement with Camille, all of it. Now she did look up, her eyes searching his face. Because of the babies. Because of you, he corrected. Because of us. The babies are a blessing, but they're not the reason. You are. Her fingers stilled their nervous rhythm on the counter. Tell me. So he did. He told her everything. About his father's death, about the pressure to maintain alliances, about his fear of disappointing the only family he had left. He told her about the board meeting, about finally standing up for his own happiness. I've spent so long trying to be my father, he admitted, that I almost missed the chance to be myself, to be the man you deserve. And who is that man? She asked softly. Someone who's learning. He moved closer, close enough to catch the vanilla scent of her skin, learning that control isn't the same as strength, that vulnerability isn't weakness, that love, real love, is worth fighting for. Love? Her voice caught on the word. Love, he confirmed. I love you, Zahara Monroe, not because of the babies, not because it's convenient, but because you challenge me, inspire me, make me want to be better, because even when you're driving me crazy with your independence, you're also showing me what real strength looks like. Tears were falling freely down her cheeks now. Took you long enough to figure it out. I'm a slow learner, he smiled, reaching out to wipe her tears. But I get there eventually. I love you too, she whispered. Even when you're being an over-controlling CEO who thinks he can fix everything. I'm working on that, he promised, pulling her closer. The board really voted with you. Unanimously, in the end. Turns out I'm not the only one who was tired of living in the past. She was quiet for a moment, her hands resting on her belly. And Camille looked relieved, actually. I think she was as trapped by expectations as I was. Zahara nodded slowly. So what happens now? Now? He placed his hands over hers, feeling the slight flutter of movement beneath. Now we figure out our future, together. No more secrets, no more hiding behind duty or fear. Together, she tested the word. I like the sound of that. Move in with me, he said, then quickly added, not because it's practical or safer or any of those logical reasons I gave before. Move in with me because I want to wake up with you every morning, because I want to learn to bake, even though we both know I'll be terrible at it, because I want us to build a home together, not just a convenient arrangement. She studied him for a long moment, her eyes bright with tears and love. Yes, she said simply. Yes, yes, she smiled. But I'm keeping my test kitchen. I wouldn't dare suggest otherwise, he laughed, pulling her into a kiss that tasted of sugar and promises. Later that night, as they lay tangled together on her couch, Zahara's head on his chest, Soren felt true peace for the first time in years. "Your father really would be proud," she said softly, "not of who he wanted you to be, but of who you are." "Who am I?" he asked, curious about her perspective. "A man strong enough to choose love," she said simply. "A man who's going to be an amazing father because he learned to put happiness above duty." He tightened his arms around her, feeling the slight swell of her stomach against his side. Their children, 3 tiny miracles who had helped him find his way to this moment. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what?" "For being patient while I figured it out. For loving me enough to demand better than what I was offering." She shifted to look at him, her eyes soft in the dim light. "That's what real love does. It doesn't settle. It doesn't compromise. It waits for the best version of both people to find each other." As if in agreement, one of the babies kicked against his hand. Zahara laughed, the sound pure joy. "I think they approve," she said. "Smart kids." He smiled. "They get that from their mother, and their father's determination," she added. "Poor world won't know what hit it when these 3 arrive." Looking down at her, glowing with love and new life, Soren knew he'd made the right choice. Some legacies were built in boardrooms, but the most important ones were built on love, trust, and the courage to choose happiness over duty. Tomorrow they would face the world. Pregnancy announcements, moving plans, merging their lives instead of their companies. But tonight was just for them, for this moment of perfect understanding between 2 people who had finally found their way to each other. The nursery walls were painted a soft golden color that reminded Zahara of perfectly caramelized sugar. She stood in the doorway of what had once been Soren's home office, watching him assemble the 3rd and final crib. Despite her protests, he'd insisted on doing it himself, his suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, and a determined set to his jaw. "You know we have people who could do this," she said, one hand resting on her now prominent belly. "Our children's first beds." He looked up, a streak of dust on his cheek. "No, this needs to be us. Though I'm starting to think these instructions were written by sadists." She laughed, the sound echoing in the room that would soon hold their 3 miracles. At 7 months pregnant with triplets, everything was becoming more challenging. But watching Soren transform from controlled CEO to hands-on father-to-be made it all worthwhile. "How did the menu tasting go?" he asked, returning to his battle with the crib parts. "It went," she hesitated, remembering the wave of emotions that had hit her during the session. "It was different." He set down his screwdriver, giving her his full attention. "Different how?" "I couldn't taste anything properly," she admitted. "Everything felt off, like my palate has completely changed." It was her biggest fear realized, that pregnancy would affect the very thing that had built her career. Her doctors had warned her that hormones could alter her sense of taste, but experiencing it was terrifying. Soren was on his feet immediately, guiding her to the plush rocking chair they'd chosen together. "Tell me, what if it doesn't come back?" she whispered, voicing the fear that had been haunting her. "What if I can't trust my own taste anymore? My whole business is built on my palate." "Hey," he knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Your business is built on more than that. It's built on creativity, innovation, understanding what people want before they know they want it. And if your taste has changed, we'll adapt. We'll figure it out together." She squeezed his hands, marveling at how this man who once approached everything like a business problem had learned to offer comfort instead of solutions. "Together," she repeated, then winced as one of the babies delivered a particularly strong kick. Although these 3 seemed to have their own opinions, Soren placed his hand on her belly, wonder spreading across his face as he felt the movement. "Strong," he murmured, "like their mother." "Stubborn," she corrected, "like their father." Their quiet moment was interrupted by the arrival of Ash, laden with shopping bags. "Okay, future parents, prepare to be amazed. I found the cutest matching onesies that say Thing 1, Thing 2, and Thing 3, yes." "No," Soren said immediately. "Yes," Zahara countered, laughing at his horror. "It's perfect." This had become their new normal. Ash dropping by with baby items, Soren pretending to be horrified by anything too cute, and Zahara mediating between them while secretly loving every minute. "How's the nursery coming along?" Ash asked, dumping her bags and surveying the room. "Oh, honey, please tell me you hired someone to finish these cribs." "He insists on doing it himself," Zahara explained, sharing a knowing look with her friend. "Of course he does." Ash rolled her eyes. "Because heaven forbid the great Soren Caldwell admit he needs help with anything." "I can hear you both," Soren muttered from his position on the floor, but there was no real annoyance in his voice. The afternoon passed in a comfortable blur of baby preparations and friendly banter. Ash organized the growing collection of clothes, while Soren finally conquered the last crib. Zahara supervised from her rocking chair, her hands constantly moving to soothe the active babies. "Have you decided on names yet?" Ash asked, folding tiny socks into pairs. "We have some ideas," Zahara said, catching Soren's eye. They'd spent countless nights discussing names, wanting to honor both their heritages while giving their children strong identities of their own. "But we're waiting to meet them," Soren added, "to see who they are." The nursery was coming together beautifully. 3 elegant cribs, each with its own mobile featuring tiny pastry shapes that Zahara had designed herself. A mural of a world map on one wall, because Soren believed in thinking globally from day one. Bookshelves already filled with stories in English, Portuguese and French, because Zahara's grandmother insisted on cultural education early. "Oh!" Zahara suddenly sat up straighter. I think I need to lie down." Both Soren and Ash were at her side instantly. "What's wrong?" Soren's voice held carefully controlled panic. "Braxton Hicks," she assured them, though the tightening in her belly was stronger than usual. "The doctor said they get more intense with triplets." Still, Soren insisted on calling their doctor, who advised them to time the contractions and head to the hospital if they got regular or more intense. It was still early, but with triplets, everything was considered high risk. Later that evening, after Ash had gone home and the contractions had subsided, Zahara found Soren in the nursery again. He was standing by the window, staring out at the Atlanta skyline. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, wrapping her arms around him from behind, her belly pressing against his back. "I was thinking about my parents," he admitted, "wishing they could be here to see this, to see who I've become because of you." She pressed a kiss to his shoulder. "They see, and they'd be so proud of the man you are." He turned to face her, his hands cradling her belly. "I never thought I could have this. Real love, a family, a future that wasn't mapped out in spreadsheets and business plans." "Speaking of plans," she said carefully, "I've been thinking about work." His hands stilled. "Oh, I want to scale back after the babies come. Not stop completely, but focus on special projects, consulting, maybe teaching." She waited for his reaction, remembering how adamant she'd once been about maintaining her empire exactly as it was. But pregnancy had changed her perspective on many things. "Are you sure?" he asked, studying her face. "This isn't because you feel pressured." "No," she smiled, loving him for asking. "It's because I want to be present for every moment with them and with you. My empire can grow slowly. Our family only gets these first moments once." He kissed her then, soft and sweet. "Whatever you want. We'll figure it out together." A flutter of movement from her belly made them both laugh. "I think they're agreeing," she said. "Or arguing," he suggested. "They are our children, after all." They stood together in the nursery, surrounded by tiny clothes and big dreams, both thinking about how far they'd come. From a chance meeting at a gala to this moment, expecting 3 babies and building a life neither of them had imagined possible. "I love you," she said softly, "even when you're being impossibly perfectionist about crib assembly." "I love you too," he replied, "even when you're sneaking those horrible onesies into our children's wardrobes." Another contraction hit, making her grip his arm. This one felt different. "Soren," she said, her voice tight. He was already reaching for his phone, timing it. "Just breathe." 5 minutes later, another one came, then another. "Call the doctor," she said, suddenly certain. "It's time." The next hour was a blur of activity. Calls to the doctor, to Ash, to her grandmother, grabbing the carefully packed hospital bag, Soren somehow remaining calm while simultaneously calling their driver, texting their families, and never letting go of her hand. In the car, between contractions, Zahara looked at the man beside her, the one who had learned to balance control with surrender, power with vulnerability, duty with love. "Ready for this?" she asked. He brought her hand to his lips. "With you, I'm ready for anything." As they pulled up to the hospital, Zahara thought about ingredients and timing, about recipes that seemed impossible until you tried them, about love that grew stronger through every challenge. Their biggest adventure was just beginning. The steady beep of hospital monitors filled the room as Zahara gripped Soren's hand through another contraction. After 12 hours of labor, the moment they'd been waiting for was finally approaching. She was exhausted but determined, just as she'd been about everything else in her life. "You're doing amazing," Soren murmured, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. He hadn't left her side once, his usual need for control channeled into being her rock, her anchor through every wave of pain. "Tell me again," she said between breaths, needing to hear his voice. "About the first time you saw me." He smiled, continuing their hours-long pattern of distraction through storytelling. "You were standing in that ballroom, gold dress, catching the light, looking like you owned the place. And all I could think was, who is this woman who shines brighter than everyone else here?" Another contraction hit, stronger than before. Dr. Wilson appeared, checking Zahara's progress. "It's time," she announced. "These babies are ready to meet their parents." The next hour was a blur of controlled chaos. Medical teams stood ready, one for each baby. Soren's hand remained firmly in hers, his voice steady in her ear, as he encouraged her through each push. "Baby A is coming," Dr. Wilson called out. "One more push, Zahara." The room filled with a strong cry as their first daughter entered the world. "She's perfect," Soren whispered, his voice thick with emotion as the nurses quickly assessed her. "Baby B is right behind," the doctor encouraged. "You can do this." Their second daughter arrived 3 minutes later, her cry just as strong as her sister's. But it was baby C, their son, arriving 5 minutes after his sister's, who made them both laugh through their tears by immediately trying to stuff his fist in his mouth, just like his mother, Soren teased, always thinking about food. Once all 3 babies were cleaned, checked, and declared healthy, they were finally placed in their parents' arms. Zahara held their daughters, while Soren cradled their son, both of them awestruck by the tiny lives they'd created. "Hello, my loves," Zahara whispered, studying their perfect faces. The girls were identical, with her warm brown skin and Soren's steel-blue eyes. Their son had a beautiful blend of both their features, his skin a tone between theirs, his eyes a striking grey-brown. "Are we still sure about the names?" Soren asked softly, unable to take his eyes off their children. Zahara nodded. They'd chosen names that honored both their heritages, while giving each child their own unique identity. Amara Grace, she touched their firstborn's cheek, Maya Rose, to their second daughter, and Alexander Kai, to their son in Soren's arms. "Perfect," he agreed, like their mother. The door opened quietly as Ash peeked in, followed by Zahara's grandmother, who had flown in from Brazil just in time. Both women's eyes filled with tears at the sight of the new family. "Oh, minha querida," her grandmother moved to the bedside, blessing each baby in Portuguese. "They are magnificent." "Want to hold your great-grandchildren, Vo?" Zahara offered, carefully transferring Amara to her grandmother's waiting arms. "3 blessings," the older woman said, rocking gently. "Just like the 3 spices in my special Brigadeiro's recipe." "Speaking of recipes," Ash said, taking Maya from Zahara, "wait until you see what your team did at the kitchen." "What do you mean?" Zahara asked, suddenly alert despite her exhaustion. "They created a new line of baby shower pastries in honor of the triplets, 3 different flavors that complement each other perfectly. They're calling it the Triple Joy Collection." Zahara felt tears well up again. Her team, her creation, continuing to innovate even while she focused on her newest and most important project, her family. "And the London contract?" she asked, remembering the deals that had been in progress. "All signed," Soren assured her. "Your deputy head chef is handling everything exactly as you planned. The Empire is safe." She relaxed back against her pillows, watching as Alexander was passed to Ash, who immediately started teaching him about the importance of good accessories. The room was filled with love and laughter, everything she'd never known she wanted until it was hers. "Tired?" Soren asked quietly, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Exhausted," she admitted, "but happy, so incredibly happy." He leaned down to kiss her softly. "Thank you. For what? For giving me everything I never knew I needed. A real family, love without conditions, 3 perfect babies, and stretch marks," she added with a laugh. "Beautiful stretch marks," he corrected. "Battle scars from bringing our miracles into the world." 6 months later, Zahara stood in her test kitchen, experimenting with new recipes, while 3 baby seats sat safely away from her workstation. Amara and Maya were napping peacefully, but Alexander watched every move she made with intense interest. "Already a foodie," Ash commented from her usual spot, bouncing Maya, who had just woken up. "He's definitely your son. And these 2 are definitely their father's daughters." Zahara smiled as Amara opened her eyes, immediately looking around the room as if assessing her surroundings. "I always alert, always observing." The kitchen door opened as Soren entered, still in his business suit but with his tie loosened, a habit he'd developed since becoming a father. "There's my family," he smiled, immediately going to kiss each baby before reaching Zahara. "How was the board meeting?" she asked, accepting his kiss. "Productive. They approved the new parental leave policy I proposed. Now every employee gets 6 months paid leave, not just the executives." Zahara felt her heart swell with pride. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who used his power to help others, who had learned to balance business with humanity. "Speaking of business," he said, picking up Alexander, who was reaching for him, "have you thought more about the cooking school idea?" She had been playing with the concept of opening a high-end culinary school, one that would allow her to pass on her knowledge while maintaining more flexible hours for their family. "I have," she said, piping a delicate rose onto a cupcake. "I think I'm ready. But I want to do it right, make it accessible to talented students regardless of their background. Maybe set up a scholarship program." "Already working on the foundation paperwork," he grinned. "I had a feeling you'd say that. You know me too well," she laughed. "I'm still learning," he said softly, shifting Alexander to his hip, "and looking forward to learning more every day." Later that evening, after the babies were asleep in their nursery, Zahara and Soren stood in their kitchen. She was teaching him to make brigadeiros, her grandmother's recipe that had started her culinary journey. "The secret," she explained, guiding his hands as he stirred, "is knowing when it's ready. Too soon, and it won't set properly. Too late, and it becomes too hard. Like love," he mused, watching the chocolate mixture thicken. "It needs the right timing, the right care, the right attention. Look at you, getting philosophical over dessert," she teased, but her heart was full. "I learn from the best." He pulled her close with his free arm. "You taught me that the sweetest things in life can't be controlled or rushed. They have to develop naturally." Through the baby monitor, they heard one of the twins start to fuss. Soon, the other two would join in. They seemed to operate on the same wavelength, even at 4 months old. "Ready for another night of triple duty?" she asked, already moving toward the nursery. "With you, always." As they walked hand in hand to tend to their babies, Zahara thought about all the ingredients that had brought them to this moment. A chance meeting at a gala, a passionate night, an unexpected pregnancy, but most importantly, the courage to choose love over convenience, truth over expectations, and the messy beauty of real life over the perfect plan. Their love story hadn't followed a recipe. It had been created from scratch, with all the mistakes and adjustments that came with original creations. But like the best desserts, the final result was something uniquely, perfectly, wonderfully their own. In the nursery, 3 pairs of eyes, steel blue and grey-brown, looked up at them with complete trust and love. Zahara felt Soren's arms wrap around her from behind as they gazed at their miracle babies. "Happy," he whispered in her ear. She turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the scar on his eyebrow that she'd grown to love. "Beyond happy," she said. "This is better than perfect. This is real." And as their babies drifted back to sleep, secure in their parents' love, Zahara and Soren shared a kiss that tasted of chocolate, happiness, and the sweet promise of forever. Based on the emotional journey of Zahara and Soren, a deep and engaging question. If you were in Zahara's shoes, living through an unexpected triplet pregnancy while struggling to maintain her professional empire, would you accept Soren's initial proposal for a marriage of convenience? Or like her, would you wait until true love revealed itself naturally, even with all the risks and uncertainties that this choice would bring? What would you do? Choose security or bet on genuine love? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.